The godson of 4 times world champion Mark Richards, Nicky Wood came of age as an international competitor last year. With injury problems behind him, Nicky started well in March with a 5th at the IMB Surf Masters in Wollongong and a 3rd at Bells Beach at Easter. Other good results followed with a 5th at the Coke Classic in Manly, a 3rd in the Rip Curl Pucas Pro in Brazil, back on home soil, a 3rd at the Margaret River Classic in Western Australia. The breakthrough came at Bondi with the 1st in the Coke Classic. All of these results and quite a few top 10 finishes see the young lad from Merewether now ranked number 13 in the world. A great achievement for a 19-year-old.
Gibson Street car park has been closed since the earthquake. Although damage was minimal, a lower ground wall had to be reinforced. The lift wall of the 11-storey building still needs extensive repairs and is out of order indefinitely. The only access is via Auckland Street through to Gibson Street. Opening hours are 7:30 in the morning, Monday to Saturdays, but with the shutdown of the Workers' Club, closing hours are earlier, 7 p.m. weeknights except Thursday night when the car park closes at 9. For the rebuilding of Hamilton, Newcastle Council has appointed a planning consultant to fast-track guidelines for Bowman Street, worst affected in the quake. Consultants will present a draft plan with a new look for Hamilton, including improved pedestrian areas, landscaping and car parking.
Since the earthquake, most of the aldermen have remained out of the mainstream of decision-making. But today it was question and answer time and a chance to be updated on where council is at with Beaumont Street. The aldermen were shown which buildings had suffered the greatest structural damage in the quake and were on the council's hit list for demolition. A council meeting is being held tonight and today's tour should be a feature. At least now the councillors are aware of what's happening.
It's thought detectives identified the body late yesterday but only released the name today. This is the most recent photo of 16-year-old Adamstown youth Michael John Swazak. Swazak was known to police through what they call a minor offence. The only other available photo is one taken several years ago. Swazak's body was found dumped in scrub beside the Pacific Highway 6 kilometres south of Karua. The remains were taken to Sydney for forensic tests which have not yet determined the cause of death.
At the International Squash Centre Gymnasium yesterday, the 1990 playing staff put their muscles to the test with a competition to find the strongest knight. 3 disciplines were used: chin-ups, which tests a man's character as much as his strength, the clean lift, where technique plays a big part, and the bench press, a real test of brute strength. It's obvious that Gary Worth and Michael Hagan have worked hard during the off-season, both lifting around the 300-pound mark. But the surprise packet was Robbie McCormick, who pound for pound was the champion. After training for 2 hours this morning, it was a chance for the players to relax as they took to the waters of Lake Macquarie in 16-foot skiffs courtesy of members of the Belmont Club. For some it was to be a daunting prospect. Trembling hooker Tony Townsend eyed his first sail with trepidation, Mark Sargent was hoping the sailing was easier than getting into the gear, and centre Jeff Doyle was loyal in club colours. But after a good start, the Burleigh footballers showed some fair skills, although at one stage it looked as if Captain Sam Stewart was going to be the first casualty, as his boat and that of Michael Hagan's were about to hang a head high on each other. Mark Glanville aboard Castrian Holmes helped his crew to a flying start, but it was later discovered that the wily youngster was an ardent and accomplished crewman. New boys Marty Creaker from New Zealand and Adrian Brucker from Queensland showed considerable skill, but in the final wash-up, it was the brilliant 5'8" Michael Hagan and the crew of Ansett Ridgeway that won the race on handicap, from Mark Glanville and Castrian Holmes, with Paul Harrigan aboard Kerry Paint's third. The Swimmers' Trophy went to James Goulding aboard the appropriately named Blacksmith Plumbers.
It's amazing how much rubbish can accumulate between annual cleanups. On Lake Macquarie, around 700 bags of garbage were collected, most of it plastic. However, there was the odd wheelbarrow and mattress carted away. Unfortunately, not all the refuse is harmless. These and many more syringes were found under the Fennell Bay Bridge. Perhaps the greatest find of the day, though, was this 14-foot boat, which had come to grief near the Royal Motor Yacht Club after floating around the lake for the last 3 months. Like most of the junk towed away, its owner had simply abandoned it. Although this one day of the year certainly makes a difference, it leaves you wondering what could be done with a little more time.
I guess the lesson to be learned is that we shouldn't leave it to an annual event. We should grab our plastic buckets and our rakes and slip out there as concerned citizens every now and again. And I'd certainly like to see them a bit more frequent than once every year.
The magazine will feature information from grassroots level on the nights, with contributions from players, coaches' postmortems on previous matches and a complete array of statistics. The 24-page full-colour magazine will initially be distributed in the Newcastle Herald and Lake Macquarie Post to more than 106,000 homes once a month. Knight's Chief General Manager Brian Judd says if demand for the magazine is shown on the Central Coast and Upper Hunter, coverage may be expanded.
Once we get up and going, we'll look at our circulation and we would want to extend it to those areas.
The first edition of Night News comes out next month.
Most of the 2.5 kilometre section of dual carriageway was open for motorists today. However, one section of the northbound lane remains to be opened tomorrow, marking the completion of this project. RTA engineers are claiming a national first for this new section of highway. It's the first public road in Australia to be made entirely of granulated slag provided by BHP for long-term testing. Most Newcastle roads use a mix of slag and gravel, but that material is becoming scarce as BHP changes its smelting process. Granulated slag, a different material, is as sharp as glass, but represents the latest in road building materials. Engineers say it sets like concrete and will be watched closely over what could be a 20-year trial. Already there's talk of using the furnace byproduct on more sections of the National Highways program. The material is covered by a conventional asphalt surface and won't be seen by drivers more interested in enjoying a safer, smoother trip in time for the Australia Day weekend.
The fireworks display has become an annual event attracting thousands to the lake foreshores and surrounding carnivals. These pictures of the display were caught on video by amateur cameraman Bruce Brown. As a grand finale, 5 of the fireworks shells were shot into the air like mortars, but it's now believed 2 of the shells collided in mid-air, sending one shell well off its planned trajectory and into the heart of the carnival. The plastic shell ploughed into the footpath, showering the area with shrapnel, peppering 13 people as they stood looking skywards and searing the clothes from their bodies.
I couldn't see anything because she was telling me this morning she saw a black thing come up. I couldn't see that. All I know was a big explosion, fumes, and we started screaming. Immediately I didn't feel anything. But you know, after a few minutes I started feeling the pain, the burning pain, the smell of my body, you know, burn body. It was horrible.
Raphael Palaki and his family of 5 were today recovering in hospital, along with 8 others, including 16-year-old Lyndon Fuller, who had one of his fingers almost severed by a razor-sharp piece of plastic.
Fire was going right through my jeans and it was coming right through, and I could feel it, and I was getting really panicky. I was trying to get them out, and they finally got them out, and they had to pull my pants down, put cold water and everything over because the fire had come through, and my finger here got snapped backwards, was broken from the hair, just come and hit me, and there was blood everywhere.
Carnival owner Brod Pavia says the stench of chemicals and the children's injuries made for a horrific scene.
Well, there's a lot of people running, a bit of chaos, and then like all hell broke loose, and it's a funny sort of, it was like a burn, but it's very hard to explain, more like a lacerated burn, I would say you'd call it. I'm not sure technically.
With the bright light of morning came the realisation of where the shell could have landed. A few metres in either direction could have plunged the shell deep into one of the rides that were darkened at the time, or it could have placed it well into the memorial park where thousands of people were watching the fireworks exhibition. But even closer to the point of impact was a children's merry-go-round. It had shut down only minutes before pieces of shell casing speared through its canvas roof. A full report on the accident is expected to be completed late this week. Darren Curtis for NBN News.
They've come in all sizes from small to large vessels. Organised by the Newcastle Maritime Museum, the regatta offers hands-on education in boating, special tours of the Royal Australian Navy's Curlew, Shoalwater and Botano, together with cruises of the harbour in the old-time sailing boats Varnon and William IV. In the beaming sunshine, it was important to have the right headgear and skin protection. But in the practice rounds for tomorrow's Formula One Powerboat Grand Prix, officials were more worried about protecting lives. Floating debris in the harbour plus a lumpy swell cut speeds dramatically. One racer slowed literally to a paddle. Preparing for the Grand Prix, a unique performer in Formula One racing. Kay Marshall, formerly from Singleton and Scone, is the first woman in the world to compete in such a race.
I love speed, I love the challenge of the water, because racing on water is totally different to racing on land. You've got the aspects of water and wind, and you've really got to keep your brain together.
The Grand Prix, including 20 powerboats, begins tomorrow at 10 a.m.
.40-year-old Melbourne driver Alan Finlay caused a sensation when he flipped his boat at the Dockyard Buoy during the hot laps to determine pole position. Finlay was trapped underwater for some time, still trapped to his harness, but finally the divers were able to get to him when the boat was righted. Mouth-to-mouth was applied immediately and continued on the way back to the dock. Finlay was met by concerned ambulance paramedics who cut away his life jacket before rushing him to Newcastle Hospital. But Finlay was lucky, suffering a big dose of Newcastle Harbour water and shock, but little else. With the drama over, it was time to get the Grand Prix underway, and what a start.
They're racing away from the dock, a magnificent sight. 45 laps of screaming action here in Formula One, and it's Graham Ogilvie who's headed off first in the True Blue number 2.
Series leader Bob Halliday, driving the LJ Hooker craft, held the lead for 16 laps before more trouble. In the top right of your screen, you will see Dave Jennings fly past Kent Island with half of his boat missing. Jennings tore the left part of the hull completely from the boat, with debris scattered all over the course. But he did a marvellous job to get his craft back to the pits. A restart followed, and once again Halliday got away to a flying start with Craig Bailey in hot pursuit. Graham Ogilvie was also right in the picture, but for the driver of 66 it was short-lived as he retired along with Ian Purden. And for Ken Evans, he decided to park in a precarious position. Halliday was leading comfortably when trouble befell him, and he was out of the race in unfortunate circumstances. The reigning champ Bailey pressed ahead and opened up a huge gap on his rivals, with Newcastle's Kent Island running well in the Valvoline boat. The surprise packet was Kay Marshall, the first female in the world to run in a Formula One powerboat race, and she was right up amongst the place getters. But after 45 long laps, it was Craig Bailey who proved the master.
He rounds the buoy now and will head up straight to take the checkered flag from Virginia Chadwick. The flag's in the air, and Craig Bailey will win the inaugural Newcastle Formula One Grand Prix.
Kent Island was an excellent second, and Kay Marshall from the Gold Coast was the toast of the town for her brilliant third.
The women's singles final saw youth pitted against experience. It was 16-year-old Stockton youngster Emily Fisher's first real crack at open tennis, though her list of achievements in junior ranks had her seeded second. Her number one seed opponent was Yvonne Stanton of Gladesville. In the first set it was all Fisher. She immediately broke Stanton's serve and then won the next 5 to take out the set to love. In fact, it wasn't until the second game of the second set that Stanton took out a game. She then buckled down to make a match of it, breaking back and using some of her know-how. But in the end, Fisher held on to take the second set and the match 7-5. She picked up $500 for her efforts. In the men's match, number one seed Peter Doohan started slowly to lose the first set in a tiebreaker 7-6 to Manly's Neil Smith. However, in the second set, Doohan proved why he was once ranked 43 in the world, settling down to take that one out 6-2, setting the stage for an exciting third set. It started out as a ding-dong affair, but finally Doohan began to take control, running out the eventual winner 6-2 and picking up the $1,000 winner's cheque. Meanwhile, Englishman Ricky Willison has won the Gordon Pacific Lake Macquarie Amateur Golf Championship with a 7-under par 4-round total of 281. Willison had rounds of 70, 73, 68 and 70 to edge out overnight leader Kemp Richardson, who finished at 5-under along with Philip Tattarani of New Zealand. The best performed local was Wayne Stewart at 4-under, but it was the lad from London who repeated last year's UK victory by Russell Claydon. Ricky Willison, the Lake Macquarie champion.
The Hunter Orchestra featured in the news several times last year, but the stories weren't always music to the ears. In September, the Australia Council pulled the plug on the orchestra's funding, saying it had failed to meet criteria, which included performing Australian pieces and increasing the number of locally based musicians. Then musical director, the late Ulrich Bernstein, retired ill, and the board was strongly criticised for advertising nationally for a conductor to fill his role. Today, however, the board was definitely looking to the future. At a news conference, Chairman John Robson announced the appointment of Ruth Appleby as administrator to bring the orchestra's finances back into line, and new musical director, Belgium-born Roland Peelman.
I feel that the board has thoroughly been vindicated. I think we have a brilliant young man in Roland. I think he is a very exciting prospect for Newcastle, and I think the public of Newcastle will come to love and admire him.
Where do you see the orchestra heading? Where would you like to take it in your time that you're here?
Well, I'd like to take it into an orchestra of the highest possible professional standards that can cater for opera, ballet, as well as symphonic concerts in Newcastle itself, as well as the region, the Hunter region, and hopefully, as the orchestra expands, the whole of New South Wales, and why not Australia?
The board has again applied to the Australia Council for $36,000 in funding, which it desperately needs to make this season a success. The board says it's met all the council's criteria, but won't know till March whether it will get the money. The first concert this year will be a special earthquake appeal on the 21st of next month. Roland Peelman accompanying world-class opera singers, all of whom will donate their time.
Amid vocal community opposition, the Toronto to Fassifern rail line is scheduled to close on March 11. In its place, a bus service. The State Rail Authority is standing by what's turned out to be a hugely unpopular move, citing massive losses and poor patronage. Today, the authority put its case to the Hunter Parliamentary Task Force.
From what I heard this morning, the SRA are totally determined to go ahead. They are quoting a lot of figures. I don't know how totally accurate those figures are because obviously they use the figures that will support their case.
Elizabeth Kirby opposes the closure, claiming buses aren't an acceptable alternative to the elderly and women with young children. She plans to put their case to State Rail Chief Ross Sayers this week. As a last resort, she says the Democrats will enlist ALP opposition to the cuts and block the necessary legislation in the upper house.
If the information I receive makes it apparent to me that it is wrong from the point of view of the travelling public to close that line, then I believe that the legislation should be blocked.
In the Hunter, there were 2 new schools to help cope with the number of students who returned to their studies today. During the last 5 months, this vacant block of land at Ashtonfield has been turned into one of the Hunter Valley's most exclusive and expensive private schools. Although the grammar school is far from complete, today was the start of lessons for 130 students. They began the year and hopefully a long tradition with the raising of the school flag. The school, which caters for kindergarten to year 11 students, displays the latest educational facilities and, as such, costs per student run high. Also competing for the title of the Valley's most prestigious school is the new Scone Grammar, which also began lessons today. 106 students from kindergarten to year 8 are enrolled at the school. For the rest of the region's schools, both private and public, the first day went without incident. Because of earthquake damage, students from Wickham, The Junction, Newcastle SSP, Waratah and Adamstown have a delayed start to their year. But the Education Department hopes that by next Monday, all schools in the region will be running smoothly.